There are questions that people stop asking because they find an answer. And then there are those questions that survive every generation because every answer creates another question. Whether God exists belongs to the second one. But the strange part is, most people aren't actually answering the question. They have already answered it. For thousands of years, philosophers around the world have argued about God with remarkable seriousness. What's striking is that the disagreement has never been between unintelligent people and intelligent people, between religion and science. Some of history's sharpest minds believed that God was the best explanation for reality. Others believed that the idea collapsed under its own weight. If anything, the debate has become more refined over time. Today we are looking at the strongest side of the argument, the case against God, not as a propaganda, but as philosophy, taken seriously on its own terms. The natural place to begin is with the oldest and the visceral challenge, the problem of evil. Imagine someone tells you that there is a being all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipotent, perfectly good. Now, then you look at the world, the wars, childhood cancers, people dying alone, in circumstances that feel completely indifferent to justice. The question almost asks itself. The problem attributed to Epicurus frames itself as trilemma. If God wants to prevent suffering and cannot, he isn't all powerful. If he can but chooses not to, he doesn't appear perfectly good. If he is both able and willing, why does so much suffering exist? Believers responded with the free will defense. Love and courage means nothing unless people can genuinely choose otherwise. A world with genuine freedom will include the possibility of suffering. It's a serious response for moral evil, for human choices. It does some work, but to be honest, it doesn't answer anything. In his 1979 paper, William Rowe introduced a case of a fawn trapped inside a forest fire, horribly burned, dying agony over several days, with no observer, with no moral lesson, and no good seemingly served by the suffering at all. No human freedom required it. It happened in a forest alone, before anyone arrived. Rowe argued that such suffering does not lead to any compensating moral or spiritual growth, is not observed or responded in ways that yield significant goods, and appears pointless from any humanly accessible perspective. Think about what it would mean for an all-loving God to have a reason for that. It would mean the reason is so far beyond human comprehension that we could never access it. And at that point, you have to ask, what kind of love operates beyond the capacity of the beloved to perceive or verify? What kind of goodness looks from the inside indistinguishable from indifference? That leads to the related argument that doesn't get much attention. J.L. Schellenberg argued in 1993 that an existence of an all-loving and personal God is not compatible with the existence of non-resistant non-believers, people who have never resisted the idea of God, who genuinely searched and still found only silence. The theist says perhaps certainty would undermine freedom, but a loving parent doesn't withhold his existence from a child who is genuinely looking for them. And then there is David Hume, who didn't need to invoke suffering at all. His skepticism about miracles wasn't that they were impossible. It was about evidence. Human beings misremember events, exaggerate stories, and deceive one another for their own personal benefit. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary convincing evidence before we should accept them. In my personal point of view, the religious stories that we are told were not meant to be taken literally. They were more of metaphorical rather than historical or literal. The testimonial foundation that most religious beliefs rest on, stories passed through generations across culture with obvious interest in their preservation, simply doesn't mean that bar. In any other domain of human life, we would not accept it. The word God doesn't arrive neutral. It arrives loaded with images across different religions. A figure in the sky, a personal judge who's constantly judging over your actions, an omniscient presence who watches and intervenes, who is the knower of the future and the past and the present, which itself is quite incoherent. These images built from conditioning, cultural inheritance, and something more intimate than theology, the fear of uncertainty. Because beneath all the doctrine, function of God, as most people hold, it is psychological. It is a guarantee that the universe has a definite meaning, that the disorienting and randomness of life is not actually random, that the suffering has a purpose somewhere, even if you can't see it, that you are being watched and it means something. I don't call myself an atheist, nor do I call myself a theist, because both of the positions eventually require the same gesture, belief. The theist says God exists, that's a belief, but some atheist says with equal certainty that God does not exist. That too is a belief, a mirror image of the same movement. And to me, there's a distinction that matters the most. Truth is God. God is not truth. When we say God is truth, we place an projected image at the center and call it real. When we say truth is God, direction completely reverses. Whatever is actually real, whatever is timeless, whatever can be seen without belief or conditioning or without an authority, that's closer to what the word God should mean, if it means anything worth keeping. Now, there's one more aspect I would like to add here, the aspect of authority. Religion establishes an authority over you and then goes on to say that we have free will. Religious leaders prescribe some rituals, some actions, segregate the actions as sin or virtue or good and evil. All of these things are nothing but mere tools to make you more mechanical, to limit your existence, limit your direct perception. Because when you accept an authority, you start to see the reality through a filter, which obstructs the direct perception of reality. And hence a conflict appears between what is and what should be. And we spend most of our lives stuck in this meaningless conflict, giving it the tag of suffering, which takes us to the God. How foolish this idea is. I want to ask you, do you have the courage to reject all the authorities psychologically? One thing's pretty clear. The word God, as we throw around a lot, is nothing but an image, fiction. Christians have a different God, Hindus have a different God, Muslims have a different God, and some goes on saying that all these paths lead to the same thing. The absolute truth. No, they don't. Truth is a pathless land and cannot be reached by any path whatsoever. If you really want to immerse yourself into the truth, into living, then you must clear out your mind with all that nonsense that was conditioned into you. It may seem rude to some theists. Atheists are truly more religious than theists, and in a good way, because they reject blind faith. They reject the authority of someone who claims to know God, who claims to experience God, and yet has nothing in their own self. They don't know their own self and they claim to know God. And the whole construction of God was based on fear, on uncertainty. Humans cannot withstand uncertainty. They fear being uncomfortable, and that is biological. That is why we constructed beautiful fantasies to comfort ourselves that someone is watching over us, that there is life after death, that we would reincarnate, that if we do certain sets of action, we would be closer to God again. If that were to be true, then why are there religion wars? Why people of every religion hate each other? Why the people of every other religion claims to say that their religion is absolute? Why is it that we fragment the humanity as a whole into different parts? Why do we separate ourselves from the rest of the mankind? The whole architecture of morality, God morality, was just designed by the ego of millions of men to keep you enslaved to your own mind. I'm not forcing you to go on and just claim that you are an atheist. No, I want you to truly understand what the religion means, what its teachings were. Most importantly, why do you want to believe? Believe is something that happens when you don't know something. If you would have known God, you wouldn't say, I believe in God. You would simply say, I know there is God. But you don't, because you know there isn't. Anyway, that's it for this video. This video might offend some people. I cannot help that. Don't escape your own actions.